Nobody expects chaos inside a church because that is supposed to be the one place where drama checks itself at the door. No cameras, no captions, no comment section energy, and yet somehow, this moment ripped straight through the silence like a leaked voicemail nobody was meant to hear. Chrisean Rock didn't just walk into church. She walked into a moment that looked calm on the surface and absolutely unhinged underneath. Witnesses say it started with a stare, not a glance, not a distracted look, but the kind of locked-in eye contact that freezes a room. Chrisean Rock allegedly looked at her son, Chrisean Jr., and everything stopped. The music, the movement, the breathing. And then, just like that, she collapsed. No warning, no build-up. Just a moment so heavy it looked like it knocked the strength right out of her body. Now the internet is asking the same question in 1,000 different ways. Was this a spiritual breakdown, a guilt spiral, a stress overload, or something darker nobody wants to say out loud? Because let's be honest, when a public figure collapses in church, people don't see faith first. They see a storyline. This is the kind of scene that makes reality TV look scripted and makes everyone wonder what was really happening behind that stare. And trust me, this story does not get calmer from here. The moment this story surfaced, it did not feel like a normal headline. It felt like something people were never supposed to see. Church is supposed to be the pause button on chaos, the place where everyone pretends their lives are not spiraling at full speed. But that day, the pause button snapped clean off. Chrisean Rock walked into a space built for calm and somehow brought every unresolved emotion with her, like invisible luggage nobody else could see until it burst open. According to people who claimed they were there, nothing seemed off at first. No dramatic entrance, no warning signs, no obvious build-up. Just another Sunday moment where everyone is halfway focused, halfway distracted, and pretending to be present. Then came the stare. Not a casual look, not a mother glancing to check where her child is sitting, but the kind of stare that pulls all the oxygen out of a room. Chrisean allegedly locked eyes with her son, and witnesses say her entire posture changed, like her body suddenly remembered something her mind was trying to forget. This is where the story shifts from emotional to unsettling. People describe her freezing in place, standing there like time hit buffering mode, no movement, no expression. Just a stillness that made others uncomfortable enough to notice. And then, before anyone could process what was happening, she collapsed. No dramatic speech, no cry for help, just down. The kind of moment that makes people question whether they should pray, panic, or pretend they did not just see something deeply personal unfold in public. Of course, the internet wasted no time turning this into a spectacle because restraint has never been its strong suit. Clips, whispers, and second-hand accounts started circulating immediately, each version more dramatic than the last. Some framed it like a spiritual awakening, others like a stress-induced breakdown, and a few leaned straight into conspiracy territory. Because when Chrisean Rock is involved, nobody assumes anything is simple. To understand why this hits so hard, you have to zoom out and look at the pressure cooker she has been living in. Chrisean's life has never been quiet. It has been loud, public, chaotic, and constantly under judgment. Every move she makes gets analyzed, criticized, memed, and monetized by people who do not know her but feel entitled to her story. Motherhood did not slow that down. It amplified it. Suddenly, every decision became a referendum on her character. The relationship with her son has been at the center of non-stop commentary. Strangers debate her parenting like it is a reality show plotline, dissecting moments that should never belong to an audience. That alone would be enough to fracture anyone's emotional stability. Now add faith into the mix, because church is where people go when they are carrying weight they cannot explain. It is where guilt, fear, hope, and desperation all sit in the same pew. So when people saw her freeze after locking eyes with her son, many interpreted it as something internal finally colliding with reality. The stare became symbolic almost instantly. Some said it looked like realization, others said it looked like regret, a few claimed it looked like fear. And the most dramatic voices insisted it was conviction hitting her all at once. Everyone projected their own narrative onto that one moment because ambiguity invites imagination. The sarcasm online came fast because empathy rarely trends for long. Jokes popped up comparing the scene to reality shows where the dramatic moment gets replayed 10 times before the commercial break. Others said this was more intense than anything scripted television could come up with. It was cruel humor, but it thrived because internet culture treats vulnerability like content. At the same time, there were people genuinely concerned. They questioned whether this was a medical issue, emotional exhaustion, or something far more serious. But even concern turned performative because every comment, every repost, every reaction fed the same machine. The line between worry and voyeurism blurred until it barely existed. What made this even messier was the lack of clear information. No official statement, no immediate clarification. Just fragments of accounts stitched together by social media. In that vacuum, speculation flourished. Some claimed she had been under immense stress leading up to the incident. Others suggested unresolved trauma finally surfaced. And then there were those who framed it as a sign, because when church is involved, symbolism becomes irresistible. Chrisean's past only fueled the theories, her history of emotional extremes, public breakdowns, and intense relationships gave people a framework to build assumptions. They did not ask what happened, they decided what must have happened based on who they think she is. That is the danger of being a public figure with a complicated narrative. People stop seeing moments and start seeing patterns they think they recognize. The presence of her son in this moment is what turned it from dramatic to haunting. Motherhood changes the stakes. A collapse on its own is alarming. A collapse after locking eyes with your child feels loaded with meaning. Whether it truly is or not, people read it as guilt, love, fear, or overwhelm all at once. The internet turned that stare into 1,000 metaphors, each one heavier than. The last faith communities reacted differently depending on perspective. Some framed it as a moment of spiritual confrontation, the kind where truth hits you without warning. Others pushed back, saying it was irresponsible to spiritualize what could be a serious health issue. That debate added another layer, turning a personal moment into a philosophical argument played out in comment sections. By the end of the first wave, one thing was clear. This was no longer just an incident in a church. It had become a symbol, a talking point, and another chapter in a story that never seems to give Chrisean room to breathe. The freeze, the stare, the collapse, they were no longer just actions. They were headlines waiting to be interpreted. And as the footage and accounts continued circulating, the tension only grew. Because moments like this never exist in isolation. Online, they demand context, reaction, and escalation. The question was no longer just what happened in that church, but what this moment would trigger next, once the initial shock wore off. The internet did what it always does best when it smells uncertainty. It turned confusion into content. The church moment stopped being a single incident and morphed into a full-blown saga, complete with hot takes, wild theories, and people who suddenly spoke with the confidence of medical professionals, spiritual leaders, and family therapists, all rolled into one. The freeze and collapse became less about what actually happened and more about what everyone wanted it to mean. Clips and secondhand footage started circulating with captions that felt heavier than the footage itself. Some posts framed it like a divine intervention, others like a mental breakdown caught in 4K, and a few leaned into straight-up horror movie energy, as if something supernatural had unfolded in the middle of a worship service. The exaggeration grew with every repost because subtlety does not survive algorithms. What began as whispers turned into bold declarations, and suddenly everyone knew what that stare meant. Celebrity reactions, or at least celebrity-adjacent reactions, slid into the chaos right on cue. Influencers who had never mentioned church a day in their lives started posting cryptic captions about faith, motherhood, and inner battles. Fans treated these vague posts like coded messages, connecting dots that may not have existed. A praying hands emoji became a statement. A sad song in a story became confirmation. Nothing was neutral anymore. Memes exploded, because that is how the internet processes discomfort. People compared the moment to dramatic scenes from reality TV where the music drops out and the camera zooms in slow motion. Others joked that this was more intense than any scripted church scene Hollywood could dream up. It was dark humor, the kind that makes you laugh and feel guilty at the same time. But it spread because humor is easier than sitting with someone else's pain. The speculation about Chrisean's mental and emotional state escalated quickly. Some viewers insisted this was the result of non-stop pressure finally cracking through her faith armor. Others argued it looked like emotional overload mixed with exhaustion, the kind that hits when you finally stop running. And then there were the extreme takes. The ones that turned concern into conspiracy, suggesting everything from staged theatrics to hidden agendas. In the internet's mind, nothing dramatic happens without motive. The presence of her son remained the emotional core of every theory. People obsessed over the idea that locking eyes with him triggered something deep and unresolved. Comment sections filled with armchair psychology, claiming that mothers sometimes see their children and suddenly confront every mistake, fear, and regret all at once. Whether that was fair or invasive did not slow the conversation. It only fueled it, because motherhood is one of the internet's favorite things to judge. Faith communities online clashed hard over the interpretation. Some called it a breakthrough moment, saying she was being spiritually confronted in a way that could not be ignored. Others pushed back aggressively, accusing people of turning a possible medical or emotional crisis into a sermon. The debate turned church timelines into battlegrounds, with scripture being quoted next to memes, a combination that perfectly summarized how chaotic the discourse had become. Meanwhile, Chrisean herself stayed largely quiet, and that silence was loud. Supporters argued she deserved privacy and recovery, while critics said her public life made moments like this inevitable. Silence was again translated as strategy by some and vulnerability by others. The longer she did not speak, the more space people had to project their own narratives onto her. Reaction channels capitalized instantly. Titles grew more dramatic by the hour. Thumbnails leaned into shock, and commentary ranged from fake concern to open mockery. Some creators pretended to be worried while clearly enjoying the spike in views. Others claimed moral high ground while replaying the clip repeatedly. The hypocrisy was thick. But it did not matter, because outrage content performs. Whether it is sincere or not, pop culture comparisons kept escalating. People likened the moment to iconic celebrity breakdowns that defined eras, moments when pressure finally spilled into public view. Some said it felt like a scene straight out of a cautionary biopic, the kind where the audience knows things are about to get worse before they get better. The dramatization only deepened the sense that this was a turning point, not just a random incident. As the discourse grew louder, empathy started getting drowned out. Even those who initially expressed concern eventually slid into speculation. Because staying neutral online feels like disappearing. Engagement rewarded extremes, not restraint. Every new theory became a performance, and every performance invited applause or attack. The situation became less about Chrisean's well-being and more about who could deliver the most convincing interpretation. The irony was impossible to miss. A moment that happened in a space meant for reflection turned into one of the loudest conversations on the internet. The collapse in church became content outside of it, dissected by people who had never set foot in that building. The contrast made everything feel even more uncomfortable, like watching something sacred get dragged into the algorithm grinder. By the time this phase peaked, the narrative had stretched so far from the original moment that it barely resembled reality. What remained was a collection of exaggerated meanings layered on top of each other, each one louder than the last. The question was no longer what actually happened, but how this moment would reshape Chrisean's public image moving forward. Because Once a moment like this enters the internet bloodstream, it does not leave unchanged, it mutates, it multiplies, and it sets the stage for fallout. And as the noise reached its loudest point, one thing became clear. This was no longer just about a collapse in church. It was about what happens when a vulnerable moment collides with a world that refuses to look away. As the noise slowly shifted from shock to judgment, the real consequences of that moment in church began to surface. And this is where the story stopped feeling viral and started feeling heavy. The freeze, the stare, the collapse were no longer just clips floating around the timeline. They became reference points. Every future conversation about Chrisean rock now circled back to that image, like a screenshot burned into public memory that refuses to fade. For Chrisean, the aftermath unfolded under a microscope. Any attempt to move forward was immediately compared to that moment. If she appeared strong, people said she was pretending it never happened. If she looked emotional, they said it confirmed everything. The internet demanded explanation, but offered no patience, recovery, reflection, or silence were all interpreted as something suspicious. Because audiences trained on chaos do not trust calm, motherhood became the sharpest blade in the discourse. The image of her locking eyes with her son before collapsing took on a symbolic weight that followed her everywhere. Supporters framed it as a moment of overwhelming love and pressure colliding at once. Critics twisted it into a narrative about responsibility, stability, and judgment. Every parenting decision she made afterward was filtered through that single second in church, as if one moment could define an entire relationship. Her reputation took a hit that did not come with clear edges. It was not a clean scandal, it was a slow erosion. Some brands grew cautious, some supporters grew quieter. Even those who defended her did so with disclaimers, as if bracing for backlash. The uncertainty was the damage. When people do not know what to believe, they often choose distance, and distance is deadly in a world built on visibility. The relationships around her felt the strain too. People close to her became part of the conversation whether they wanted to or not. Silence from certain figures was interpreted as judgment. Support from others was seen as damage control. Every interaction, or lack of one, was analyzed like a chess move. The moment in church became a fault line, quietly shifting how alliances were perceived. Public perception hardened in uncomfortable ways. Some viewers decided this was proof of long-standing instability, retroactively applying it to past moments. To justify their opinions, others saw it as evidence of someone being crushed by relentless scrutiny. Both sides spoke with certainty. Even though neither actually knew what was happening behind the scenes, the truth became secondary to narrative. And narrative is what sticks. This incident also reignited conversations about the cost of public life. People asked whether anyone could survive this level of exposure without breaking at some point. Others argued that fame comes with accountability and consequences. The irony was that these debates played out using the same clips and speculation. That contributed to the pressure in the first place. The cycle fed itself. Faith, which should have been a refuge in that moment, became another battleground. Some praised the vulnerability, calling it a rare glimpse of raw humanity in a curated world. Others accused her of performing spirituality for sympathy, a claim that revealed more about the accuser than the accused. The collapse in church blurred lines between sacred and spectacle, leaving discomfort in its wake. The internet, predictably, moved on to the next headline, but the residue stayed. Search results did not disappear. Reaction videos remained archived. Thumbnails with shocked expressions and bold text continued to circulate. Even when the trend cooled, the moment lived on, ready to resurface whenever her name trended again. That is the quiet cruelty of viral culture. It never fully lets go. What made this moment particularly haunting was its ambiguity. There was no clear villain, no confirmed explanation, no neat conclusion. It sat in the uncomfortable space between emotional vulnerability and public consumption. People wanted answers. But answers do not always exist in forms that satisfy an audience. That lack of closure kept curiosity alive. simmering under the surface. In the end, this was not just about a collapse in church. It was about what happens when a human moment collides with an algorithm that thrives on extremes. It was about how quickly compassion gets crowded out by commentary. And it was about how one unguarded second can redefine a public figure in ways they never consented to. As the dust settled, one truth became impossible to ignore. This moment did not end anything, it shifted everything. How Chrisean is viewed, how her choices are interpreted, how her story unfolds from here. All of it now carries the shadow of that stare and that collapse. The audience may move on, but the narrative has changed, and the most unsettling part is that this still does not feel finished. It feels like a turning point, not a conclusion. Because in a world where every breath is watched and every pause is analyzed, silence is never the end. It is just the space before the next headline finds its way into the spotlight. And this is where we stop pretending this was just another viral clip and call it what it really is, a moment that cracked. The image wide open, one stare, one collapse. And suddenly the internet decided it knew everything. That is how fast narratives get written, rewritten, and weaponized. If you think this was random, you have not been watching closely. Moments like this do not come out of nowhere. They come from pressure stacking up until something finally gives. Now it is your turn to speak. Drop your thoughts in the comments and do not hold back. Was this a spiritual breaking point, emotional overload, or the weight of non-stop scrutiny finally crashing down all at once? All at once. Do you see vulnerability here? Or do you see the internet doing what it always does, turning pain into performance? The comment section is where the real debate lives. And trust me, it is already heating up. If this breakdown had you locked in, smash that like button like it owes you money and has been dodging your calls all week. It tells the algorithm you want more unfiltered, uncomfortable truth, not watered-down takes. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because stories like this do not stop, they evolve. The next twist always drops when people least expect it. Here, we do not sanitize chaos or tiptoe around uncomfortable moments. We dig into the mess, question the narratives, and expose how fame twists real life into spectacle. New scandals, breakdowns, and shocking moments are always loading, and you already know this is where they get unpacked, because celebrity life is loud, fragile, and unforgiving. And one moment can change everything. This is celeb insanity, where the spotlight lies, the pressure never sleeps, and the truth is always messier than the headline.